Yeah, let's go ahead, inshallah. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ali bayt tayyibin at-tahirin.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Thank you all for joining us today. Alhamdulillah, we have the great opportunity to continue on with this series of lectures, Upgrade Yourself, which is an excellent theme for this holy month of Ramadan, where we have a special divine opportunity to build ourselves through these building blocks that respected Sheikh Hyder has been providing to us. Alhamdulillah, and without any further ado, we can continue with the program.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث صدق الله العلي العظيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين سيما بقية الله في الأرضين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. My dear brothers and sisters, respected elders, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to start, as always, by thanking the honorable organizers of this event. I'd also like to remind us of what this series has been about. It's been about upgrading ourselves, about taking ourselves to that next degree and that next level that we all crave for in our heart of hearts. But sometimes the road ahead is not made clear for us. Today, we're going to be discussing about respecting parents and how respecting parents is actually one of the doors of mercy that Allah has given to us. Just as a very quick recap, we've been talking about Tawheed and how Tawheed is not just an idea in our minds, but something which needs to be implemented in society. You see, respecting parents comes under the folds of Tawheed. And all such things, all of these akhlaqi traits that we're often hearing so often from the member of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, these akhlaqi traits are there because Allah wishes to establish His governance on earth, or rather, He wishes for us to act upon Tawheed so that we can bring about the divine government and the divine system of Allah on earth. هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على دين كله. It is He who has sent the messenger and this deen of ours so that it may prevail over all other ideologies and all other religions. You see, Islam has come in order to create harmony and a hierarchy within the household and within society, and then within the country, and then throughout the entire globe. A part of that is the love between a husband and wife. And a part of that is what we're going to be discussing today, which is respecting parents. So The first verse that I'd like to open up for us here, inshallah, is a very beautiful verse, which I'm sure that most people who are listening have actually heard already, incidentally, from their parents. The Quran tells us very eloquently, فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ وَلَا تَنْحَرْهُمَا. It says, do not, and just to give you a bit of context, it says, if any of your parents reach old age, do not even utter the word uff to them, nor repel them in any way. So very quickly, what is this uff? You see, in Arabic, you say uff when you are slightly displeased. If we go to the tafsir of this verse, it actually explains that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to present the slightest and most tiny, seemingly insignificant expression of discontent. A translation of uff in modern society would be to say, ugh, oof, for crying out loud, to roll your eyes at your parents, to let out any kind of sigh. May Allah help us, inshallah, to reach such a level that we don't express even the slightest amount of discontent or contempt for our parents. And may Allah, inshallah, forgive us in this holy month of Ramadan for having expressed any sort of negative expression towards our parents. Now, I'm going to get a little bit harsh throughout this discussion. I hope that you can bear with me, but there are some points that I want to get across, which I find difficult to get across without sharing personal experiences and without just being completely sincere and frank. So before I dive into this, I would like to ask your forgiveness in advance. But there are certain things that I've seen with my own eyes in the society, and they are absolutely shocking. And they were shocking for me even before I came to the holy city of Qom. For example, youths rolling their eyes at their parents. Like, who are you? Why are you rolling your eyes at your parents? Who do you think you are? Like, seriously. I've seen some youths using a loud voice in front of their parents. It's absolutely shocking and disturbing. They get into arguments. They start to talk to their parents with a raised voice. What are you doing? How could you even think of doing something like that? And I understand that many of these things happen on the spur of the moment and they're not planned, and sometimes parents can get on our nerves. But again, we have to ask ourselves, who are we? What do we actually think of ourselves to speak to our parents in such a way? Now, some of the arguments that youths will often come back with, and by the way, this is relevant for the elders in the community as well, the respected elders, because many of them are blessed to have their parents still with them. And though they have actually reached old age, and because now they've reached old age, we somehow find a way to justify speaking to them in a certain way. We find a way to say that, well, they're old and they're not thinking straight, so I have to use a harsh tongue with them. They raised me when I was a child in a certain way, and they used to taunt me, they used to tell me off, and they used to use harsh language with me. Now that they're old, they are behaving like children, so I need to discipline them. Ya Allah, may Allah forgive us. Islam is telling us certain behavioral codes that we are supposed to conform to. But what do? We come along and we justify it. We say that, for example, you don't know my parents, Sheikh. Don't try and talk to me like that. My parents are crazy. You don't know the kinds of things that they say or the kinds of pains that they put me through. People come and say, but Sheikh, they are wrong. They might be wrong. This is not a question about them being right or wrong. Islam did not come and say, Quran didn't come and say, be good to your parents if these certain traits exist within them. No. Alhamdulillah, we're blessed that some of the people who are joining us tonight, and inshallah also in the future, wherever you are, and whatever time you're watching this in, there are many people who have newly come to the faith. They've entered into the folds of Islam. They've said their Shahada and now they're Muslims. And so their parents are following some other religion. They're following Hinduism. They're following Christianity. They're following Sikhism. They're following some other creed altogether. And one of the blessings that I've personally had is when you come to the Halsa, you meet lots of people who have come to the religion from a different background and a different faith. And think about the struggles that they have to endure with their parents. Their parents don't understand why they wish to pray. They don't understand, for instance, why certain Muslimas, when they enter into the religion, they wish to observe hijab. And so their parents are constantly telling them, why are you doing this? You look so beautiful, and now you've covered yourself up with hijab. Why are you doing this? You had such a high-paid job, but now you've stopped taking interest. Why are you doing this? You were doing this really well, and now you've just given it all up for God or for Islam, etc., etc. Think about the psychological trauma that is being caused to our brothers and sisters who have newly entered into the religion, and yet when they open the Quran and it says that you need to be good to your parents, they know and they understand that this is regardless of whether your parents are right or wrong. Another way in which we justify actually being rude to our parents is when we say things like, oh, this is just the way that our relationship is. You wouldn't understand, Sheikh. Are you sure I wouldn't understand? Trust me, I do. But what I'm saying is, even if we have adopted certain behavioral traits with our parents, and that's the way like we treat each other like friends, we need to break out of that if it is leading us to letting out an off from our lips. Your parents are, in one sense, not your friends. No, 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 no. And I'm going to explain how the Islamic literature explains to us very, very clearly and evidently that we're supposed to behave in a certain way with our parents, even if it feels fake to begin with. Imam Khamenei teaches us that, look, we need to raise our children in such a manner that they will kiss the hands of their mothers. You have to recognize that just as Islam has come to create harmony in the household, harmony in the family structure, the Western Taghuti systems have done everything in their power to break that moral code and those ethical traits. And you will see that there is a continuous and constant theme throughout pretty much all Western media and comedy and sitcoms and movies and even video games, where there is a constant theme of parents being absolutely incompetent, parents being stupid, especially fathers being idiotic. We have been fed this to such an extent from a young age that we have not even recognized what we have been eating and what we've been consuming. I'm talking about the media here, not food. I know some people are fasting, but try and think about the media right now. The media is like a food. And just like when you consume a burger, you're not just consuming the taste of that which you can taste. No, you're consuming the chemicals that go along with it. So similarly, the media is like food. When you consume the media, i.e. when you watch a certain video or sitcom or comedy or movie, whatever you're consuming, you're not just consuming the taste, i.e. the entertainment of that media. No, you're also consuming the ideologies which are presented therein. And I don't want to give any examples, but you can think of examples yourself where this theme of the idiotic dad and the feminist mother and the children who are rude to their parents, seeing something has an effect on human behavior. And there's a long discussion to be had on that. Now, there may be times where you are rude to your parents, where you shout at them. You have to just hold on a moment, recognize and realize that your entire life is going to be replayed to you. You're going to view your life every moment and every tiny little detail of your life is going to be shown to you like a movie after you have passed on from this lowly dunya. And those moments where you have raised your voice, where you have shouted at your parents, where you have argued unnecessarily with your parents, those are going to be such a moment of shame for you. You're going to be filled with such a great amount of regret when it comes to these things. Now, recently I was talking to a brother out there. One of our brothers, he's going through a spiritual awakening, and I'd like to ask everybody to pray that everybody gets a spiritual awakening, especially in these days of Ramadan. And during this spiritual awakening that he's had, he said, you know what? I've been treating my parents without consciously trying to, just because I recognized Allah, and through that I recognized how I'm supposed to behave with my parents. I've been treating them way better. Like, I've been respecting them. I've been showing them love. There's one love that's just inside your heart, but you don't show it. But the Quran talks about a different kind of love. It talks about mawadda, which is a love which you show. And so this brother, perceiving and recognizing that showing love to your parents is a form of worship, through this, he said to me personally that they have been respecting me like never before. I didn't show them love in order to gain respect. I showed them love purely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But now they're respecting me as though, wait for it, as though I'm an adult. Isn't that weird? Ask anybody out there, even if you're 30 years old and you've got kids of your own, your parents will still somehow find a way to treat you as though you are the 6-year-old who broke his toy, or I don't know, got bullied and came back home from school, or got into some trouble or something, and they will still treat you like that. And you will be like, Mom, Dad, I'm 30. I've got kids of my own. Can you stop that, please? That respect just doesn't come. But this brother, because he's shown mawadda sincerely, he himself is recognizing that his parents are showing him respect. There is a tremendous amount of wisdom in everything that Islam tells us to do. And if we try them, we will recognize the benefits of it without even going towards those benefits. Now, I've noticed also that some people do certain things, some youths, and I want to say the adults as well, really nasty things. And this next generation particularly, I remember walking into a room and just sitting down. There was a youth there, and he had his feet up on the table. His father walked into the room, and you're expected to sit up straight, at least, put your feet down, say salamun alaikum. Nothing. He's kicking back, he's relaxing, his feet are up on the table. In Western society, such things are deemed normal. This is anything but normal. Dear brothers and sisters, respected elders, we need to look at our behaviors, go back, analyze them. If we want to upgrade ourselves, we need to start changing certain things that we have made normal. They're not normal at all. Go to the literature of the Ahlul Bayt. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he tells us a tremendous amount, or in just a few sentences, you can get a tremendous amount of wisdom about how we're supposed to behave. When it comes to our fathers, for example, one of the ahadith tells us that it is the right of your father that you do not walk in front of him. You're in the street, you're walking down the street. It's become normal for children to walk in front of their parents. And I'm talking about children as in you could still be 30, 40, 50 years old. Your parents are still alive. Why are you walking in front of your parents? Again, something that we think is small, insignificant, but this can be likened to that oof. If not, it's worse than that, oof. Another example of what they tell us is, look, if you go into a gathering with your father, you should not sit down until he has sat down. Wait until he has sat down, then take your seat. What happens with us? We go into a gathering, nowadays we're in lockdown and we're at social distancing, so many gatherings are not taking place. But inshallah, I ask everybody to pray that the virus, it goes away. Go away, you nasty, nasty virus. When it goes, inshallah, and things return to normal, bear this in mind. If Allah gives us the opportunity to demonstrate this ethical trait of Islam in our behavior, don't sit down before your father sits down. In a modern, to give a kind of a modern example of the kind of things that we're talking about here in regards to disrespecting parents, youths have phones. And these phones, while there's a great amount of benefit in them, sometimes they can be used to disrespect our parents. We're on the phone, we're talking to a friend, our mother calls us from downstairs. What do we say? I'm on the phone, Mom. What are you doing? Hang up that phone, tell your friend goodbye and go and answer your parents. There is a certain fear that we are supposed to have for our parents. A fear, a tremendous fear, an unimaginable amount of fear. Western society has taught us to not fear our parents. It's told us that fear is a bad thing. No. Fear is a very good thing. Fear is that which Allah has instilled within us to stop us from going towards certain evils. If we didn't have any fear, people would just be jumping off cliffs. They're not even afraid of anything. People would be jumping into, like molten lava. People would be going out into the night, wearing lots of gold. Rob me, I'm not afraid. Fear is a good thing. It keeps us intelligent. And fear is something we're supposed to have for parents. What does Imam Sajjad alayhi salam teach us in this regard? Go to the du'as. Go look at Sahifa Sajjadiyah. What does Imam Sajjad teach us? He says, Oh Allah, teaches us to pray. He says, Oh Allah, help me to fear my parents as one would fear a tyrannical king. You know what a tyrannical king is? A tyrannical king, if he so much as raises his finger, he has the power to terminate you. Think about Saddam Hussein. You know what Saddam Hussein used to do? He used to burn people in a pool of acid. Just throw them in there and watch them melt. There's actually a story where Saddam Hussein, single tear came out of his eye when he watched somebody burning in front of him. Even a tyrant that great has the ability to have some level of empathy. Think about Hitler, think about Mussolini, think about these great tyrannical overlords who have such a tremendous amount of power that people would shake, they would tremble when standing in front of them, when sitting in front of them. They would not speak unless given the permission to speak. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. I'm so thankful, and this is where I'm going to be a little bit personal. I hope you don't mind. So thankful that when I was a kid, I was terrified of my dad. Absolutely terrified of him. If he said my name, I would go running. Over the generations, I've noticed that this fear, generally speaking, has left the next generation. If we go to the generation before us, who we often criticize, the generation of the 40, 50 plus year olds, they had many, let's say they had many flaws, but they had one thing intact. They had this beautiful respect for their parents. And before I come back to this point, I want to take us somewhere else now. I want to make it very clear that this is not about obedience. Often when we have these discussions, it can get confusing. And lots of the youths and children generally, and when I say children again, I'm talking about anybody whose parents are alive, anybody who's not orphaned, whose parents are still with them. We get confused because what our parents sometimes tell us is obedience to me is absolutely wajib. You have to obey me in everything. If we look at the Quran, if we look at the Hadith, it's not necessarily talking about obedience. Look at what the Quran says very beautifully. وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانَ بِوَالِدَيْهِ حُسْنًا. We have enjoined upon the human to be good to his parents. Husna, husna, hasana, to be good. It's the same root from which we get Hasan and Hussein, just as a tangent here. Hasan, Hussein, Muhsin, they all come from hasana, which means a tremendous amount of good. You need to do good to your parents. And then it says, however, if they tell you to attribute to Allah other than that which you don't have knowledge about, they tell you to do shirk, in other words, فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا, then do not obey them. Lots of people get into this confusion. They think that the Quran and Islam is telling us to obey our parents absolutely. Actually, the phrase that we'll find in the Quran in relation to parents is the opposite. It's telling us, do not obey your parents if they tell you to do shirk. Now, very quickly, what do we mean by shirk? We've had that discussion, inshallah, for those who are with us on the second night. On the first night, we talked about Tawheed as opposed to polytheism. We talked about polytheism, not shirk, not just being, bowing down to a stone statue, but rather about a mentality. In short, an idol is anything that you worship other than Allah. It is that which you raise above Allah in your mind, whether it's a taghuti system or some sort of tyrant, or something as seemingly insignificant as your pillow. Yes, your pillow can be an idol. How? If you wake up for Fajr, but then you don't go and pray, you go back because your pillow is so nice and warm and you just want to snuggle with it. So you go back to sleep without having prayed your Fajr Salah. You've just raised your pillow above the command of Allah, and thereby you've created an idol out of your pillow. In our context, what we're talking about is if your parents tell you to commit any sort of sin. Where does this get even more complicated? We talked about those who are reverts, who have come to the religion of Islam. Their parents, for example, are telling them to do something haram. They're telling them to worship other gods. They're telling them to eat pork. They're telling them to do this, to do that, which is outside the folds of Islam. They have to say no. They have to disobey their parents. Islam is telling us how to do it. You see, we have to disobey them in a way that is loving, in a way that is kind, a way that shows affection. And if we look at what we discussed in the previous lecture about there being certain levels, first you become a Muslim, then you become a mu'min, then you become one of the awliya Allah, you become one of the Shia. You see, there is a conversion that we can all participate in. Many Muslims, they feel that reverts are better than them. And in some sense, they're absolutely right, because they came from being a non-Muslim and they took that leap of faith. They understood Islam and they came towards the religion of Islam. And so many Muslims feel envious of them in a good way. They feel envious because they feel like you've done something which I can never do because I was already born a Muslim. And this is a good kind of envy to have. But let me remind you that we as Muslims, even those who have reverted, all of us as a family can still convert again and again and again and again. How? We might be Muslims, but have we become a mu'min? We might be mu'min, but have we become a Shia? We might be Shia, but have we become one of the awliya Allah? And these degrees are various, and there are thousands of degrees. There's 7 layers of heaven, and each one of those layers may have 1,000 different steps on each one of them. The point is, sometimes you may become a mu'min, you might go to a higher level, but your parents are still on that lower level. And so their expectations of you are still at that first level. You still need to disobey your parents It may be that you need to do something to get to a higher stage. And I'm not talking about something that you're confused about. Oftentimes, our parents actually know what is best for us. And we overlook that and we think, no, 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 I know better. No, Islam doesn't teach us to have this level of arrogance. But at the same time, it may be that Allah has given you a level of knowledge. He's guided you to something which your parents have not yet been guided to. When it comes to this, it becomes a little bit complicated. And you start to think, what do I do in this situation? Do I obey my parents or do I obey that which is absolutely right? I'll give you an example. Do you think that those 72 who were with Imam Hussein alayhi salam in Karbala, do you think that all of them, their parents were absolutely pleased and said, yes, absolutely you should go? No. Do you think that those who went to the Jibha and went to fight and defend the Islamic revolution in Iran back in 1979 and onwards, and those who went to defend the shrine of Sayyidah Zainab in recent years, do you think all of them, their parents were absolutely happy with them? No. They probably told them, don't go. You can do a job here. You can become a farmer. You can build a business, etc., etc., etc. How did those great souls leave? They didn't say, screw you, mom, screw you, dad. I know better than you. I know the religion. You don't know. I'm off. No. There is a beautiful video of Shaheed Hujaji. Shaheed Hujaji, before he goes to defend the shrine of Sayyidah Zainab, there is a video of him. He goes to meet his father. He doesn't just kiss his hand. He goes down onto the ground and kisses his father's feet. This is the level that we need to reach. And inshallah, even higher if Allah gives us the permission. So it's not always about obedience. Very quickly, sometimes when it comes to obeying our parents, it's the parents' fault. Sometimes it's the parents' fault. And this is a lesson for myself as well, because I'm a parent now. And it's a lesson for those youths who are listening who will be parents in the future. Sometimes parents make a very big mistake. What is that mistake? They fight with each other in front of the parents. Children are clever. They are little evil little creatures sometimes, and they're waiting to see any ounce of weakness, and they will use the strategy which the Taghuts sometimes use, which is divide and conquer. And if they see that dad is disciplining them, but mum is stopping the dad and shouting at the dad, don't discipline them, they'll take advantage of that. Nobody likes to be disciplined, do they? And vice versa. Parents need to be a united front. Children are sticky. They are dangerous. They will very quickly slip out of your hands. And we need to instill this fear in them from a young age. Now, I say here something very controversial. I hope you can forgive me, but I'm going to say it. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. The old generation had that fear instilled within them. And I'm seeing, and you're seeing too, that the next generation, fear gone. They ain't got no fear. They're gone. Mum, who's mum? Dad, who's dad? Yeah, whatever. They roll their eyes. They say off. They say much more than off. All right. They keep their feet up on the table. We're just losing them. Okay. I say we need to honor the old ways. We need to stop being so soft with our children. We need to beat them. Yep, that's right. I said it. We need to beat our children. And there's a very funny comedian, and I'm going to explain this, don't worry. It's not as controversial as it sounds, and I'm not a brutal, violent dad or anything like that, and I'm not advocating for that either. But I'd like us to consider this. There's a funny guy, a comedian. I won't mention his name, but one of the great things about comedy is you can get away with murder. I mean, you can say the most outrageously and racist things as a comedian and get away with it. If a politician said the same thing, he'd be hung, drawn, and quartered. But comedians can get away with it. This comedian, he's a colored comedian. He's brown, and he says, "White parents, please beat your kids." How are you going to feel when your kid is out there, right? And he's surrounded by brown friends and they're all talking about, yeah, I got a beating. I got such a bad beating last night. And another one says, oh yeah, my dad got the belt out on me and blah, 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 blah. And then your white child, he goes, I got sent to my room. And then the brown kids turn around like, you have a room? And it's a funny point to contemplate on. I'm not saying that we should beat our children physically, but what I am saying is there are ways to instill fear in our children, and we have to find a way to beat them without actually beating them. The more somebody's understanding of Islam increases, and the more one's like perception of the mercy of Allah grows within one's heart, the less he can raise his hand on somebody who is weaker than them. It's very difficult to do for one who is a Muslim and treading on the path of Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. Very, very difficult. In fact, many times when we hear things to do with violence in the Islamic literature, particularly when it comes to beating, only those who have a misunderstanding of Islam would think it means, take out a baton and just beat them, beat them blue until they're blue and bruised. And no, Islam doesn't say that. I remember my teacher once said that the urafa are those who sometimes they get visions, as the Holy Prophet says that the salah, the prayers, are the mi'raj. They are the vision of the mu'min. Inshallah, if we're praying our prayers properly, Allah opens up the curtains of this reality and He shows us the other dimensions and the real worlds that exist all around us while we remain unaware. There was an arif who had acquired this to a certain extent. One day, he was at home and his child misbehaved. And at that moment, he lost his temper. For a split moment, he lost his temper. And he raised his hand to hit the child. My teacher says that at that very moment, for a blink of an eye, Allah removed the veils from in front of him. And he witnessed Imam Ali alayhi salam standing in front of him with his hand raised. And he said, if you hit the child, I will hit you. And it was a funny story and we all laughed when the teacher told us. But at the same time, there is a point for us to contemplate on here now. Islam teaches us to have mercy on those who are weaker than us. And who is weaker than a child? Who's weaker than those upon whom Allah has given us power over? Very quickly, a hadith from Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, if Allah gives you the strength to overcome your enemy, to defeat your enemy, to pin down your enemy, then forgive him out of thankfulness for the fact that Allah gave you the strength in the first place. Islam teaches us to have mercy even with our enemies. Inshallah, Allah teaches us the realities behind these things. Now, when it comes to respecting our parents, one of the things that's taken place is that we have taken parenthood itself for granted. We thought to ourselves, well, yeah, my parents raised me, they clothed me, they fed me, but that's what all parents do. Parents are supposed to do that. And if they didn't do it, they'd be punished. So we take it for granted. Remember, there are parents out there who don't treat their children with such mercy. There are children out there who are horribly and just horrifically abused. There are children out there who are abandoned, whose parents leave them. There are children out there who are killed by their parents. And I don't want to go into that because it's a very distressing thing when we think about it. We should not take the love and care that our parents have given us for granted. There is a certain attitude that Islam is teaching us to have in regards to our parents. What does the Quran teach us to say? It says, رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. It teaches us to say, oh Allah, have mercy on my parents, for they raised me when I was little. They raised me. Rabbayani comes from Rabb. It's talking about that nourishing. They were almost like the Lord for me. They fed me, they clothed me, they gave me my name. And this is about the philosophy of Islam when it comes to recognizing what the divine reality of parenthood really is. If we go to Risalatul Huquq and we go to the literature, we will find some extraordinary things that the A'imma have taught us in regards to the parents. They say to us that one of the rights of the father, for example, is that you should recognize that he is the roots and you are its branch. Every good that you perceive within yourself, know that it is because of your father. And this is why when we go to the Quran, there are certain beautiful phrases which we won't understand unless we bear in mind this divine philosophy of Islam, which we learn from the Ahlul Bayt. For example, the Quran teaches us to say, رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لِي وَلِوَالِدَيَّ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَوْمَ يَقُومُ الْحِسَابِ. It says, "Oh Allah, forgive me and my parents and the believers on the day where you bring the hisab, the record, the day of judgment." Notice how the Quran is teaching us not to just ask for forgiveness for ourselves, but rather to ask forgiveness for our parents as well. Why? Because Islam wants us to recognize that you and your father, you and your mother, you and your lineage going all the way back to Adam is one line. You and the actions that you carry out, it will have an effect on your parents and vice versa. This is why one of the things that we learn from the hadith is that the Holy Prophet ﷺ teaches us that there are things that will give you divine reward and ajr and thawab even after you have died. Among those things is to leave behind mu'min children, believing children, those who are worshipping Allah even after you have died. Their worship will be counted partly as your worship too. And then we have the verse of the Quran, which is the verse that I'd actually like to end on. It's a very, very beautiful verse. And through this verse, I understood Imam al-Mahdi ajjalallahu ta'ala farajah sharif. It's about Prophet Sulaiman. He looks at the ant and the ant cries out to the other ants and it says, the army of Sulaiman is coming, they're going to crush us. And so Sulaiman looks at this ant and he smiles. He smiles. He smiles. He smiles. Okay, before I tell you the verse, I have to just quickly give a little bit of explanation here. People don't understand that the Imam of the time has the ability to hear us right now. That he can be listening to this conversation right now and at the same time be listening to other conversations. People don't understand that Allah has bestowed Imam al-Hujjatul Qa'im al-Mahdi with a certain level of knowledge through which he can understand the various tongues of all the animals and the birds. He can understand the winds, that he knows what is within our hearts. Think about this. This is why I tell the youths often, don't just read the Quran, visualize it. The army of Sulaiman is traveling. The flags are fluttering in the wind. The hooves of the horses are banging on the ground. The shields are clattering with the armor. The swords are drawn and sheathed. And yet, this prophet of Allah can hear the faintest whispering of an ant. And it's not even a whisper because ants don't actually make noise. They communicate with their feelers. The prophet can understand it. Anyway, so he smiles. And through this, we can understand that Imam Zaman, may Allah give us the ability, inshallah, to put a smile on the face of Imam Zaman. Anyway, what does Prophet Sulaiman do when he smiles and when he witnesses this? He says, ربي أوزعني أن أشكر نعمتك التي أنعمت علي وعلى والدي وأن أعمل صالحا ترضاه وادخلني برحمتك في عبادك الصالحين. He says, "Oh Allah, grant me that I should be thankful to you for the bounty that you have bestowed upon me and my parents." And then the verse goes on. You notice that he doesn't just ask Allah to give him thankfulness for himself. No, he recognizes that his parents are a part of him. And so he's praying for his parents and for himself. Now, the very final point that I'm going to end on, inshallah, I'm not going to take any more of your time, is this. In Islam, we have a concept, as well as our physical parents who gave birth to us and through whom Allah created us, we also have spiritual parents. Who are those spiritual parents? They are Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam and Imam Ali alayhi salam. They are our spiritual parents. And so every time that Allah is speaking to us about respecting parents, loving parents, we have to recognize that they too, spiritually, are a part of our spiritual bloodline, for want of a better phrase. They are a part of us too. And so we're not only praying for ourselves, we're praying for them. And so when Allah is telling us to obey the parents, He's also telling us to obey and respect and to give kindness and to love them. And the spirit is greater than this physical body, which will just go in the end. It's the spirit and the soul that will remain. And so if any time we are confused, dear brothers and sisters, respected elders, number one, we respect and love and care for our parents because Allah tells us to. And number two, respect and obedience to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the successors of the Prophet come first and foremost, and after that, obedience to our physical parents come. I hope that I was able to shed a little bit of light, inshallah, into this domain of respecting our parents and helped us to understand, inshallah, that in order to upgrade ourselves and to open up that door of mercy, we have to show this supreme level of respect. May Allah, inshallah, help us to open up this door of mercy. May Allah help us, inshallah, to put aside any ill behaviors that we have taken upon ourselves and we've gotten accustomed to, so that we can eradicate those un-Islamic behaviors from ourselves, and so that we can step and tread truly on the path of what Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad wish us to tread upon. May Allah help us to recognize and come out of any form of confusion that we may be in, and may Allah help us to be the true servants of Imam al-Hujjat al-Qa'im al-Mahdi ajjalallahu ta'ala farajah sharif. And I'd like to ask everybody to forgive us because we're not going to be having a Q&A session today. I know that many people might have questions. I ask you sincerely, please do save those questions and ask them in the next session. I'll try to allow for a little bit of more time next time so that you can ask today's questions tomorrow. And I'd like to ask everybody to raise their hands wherever they are and pray for the dhuhur of Imam al-Hujjat al-Qa'im al-Mahdi. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma kulli waliyaka al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan. صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتأه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.